Greetings, folks. This is Scott, and you're tuning into A Woman's Place, the podcast where we break down all the policies and politics that affect the 51%. That's right, women are half the US population, and Ashley and I are here to give you the facts about how today's events are affecting them. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome, Ashley Brown.
Hello, Scott Osborne. How are you?
I'm excellent. How are you today?
Good. Good.
Good. I'm excited about getting going here today, late April.
I can't believe it's late April.
But it is,
Late April. And we've been doing this for a minute, and we just said we're getting a little crisper. I'm not saying quite as much.
Well, excellent. Just goes to show we can learn as we go.
Low bar, Scott. Low bar.
Let's do a little recap. What did we do last week? For those who missed it, we did gender pay gaps and wealth gaps for women. That was a big one. Well,
and I think our topic today, as we get into it, is just such a big contributor to some of that. So as we're building on themes and kind of tying our processes and barriers together of what are some of the impediments to especially women in wage earning and wealth building and all of it. So it's good.
And I hope people who maybe haven't heard last week yet, if they hear gender pay gap or gender wealth gap, I hope they don't think it doesn't exist, because one of the big takeaways after all my research on last week is, boy, this is still an issue. Even though we see so many women accomplishing many things in the work world, the gap is still a huge issue and the wealth gap is still a huge issue. So I hope people continue to take those seriously and really look at what can be done.
Well, I think part of it and what we're trying to do is raise awareness on the issue and dive into some of the links we share and the research, and so people can be informed on what's happening. I think that's a huge opportunity.
Absolutely. But something else happened in the last 2 weeks. I think we should just mention, we're not going to dive into it, but since I always like to talk a little bit about something topical, is this executive order from the administration questioning the 501c3 status. And it was specifically about Harvard University, because there's currently obviously the Trump administration is taking on some major universities. But the reason it's significant is because it has potential to threaten the nonprofit status of so many organizations, gender-related, social service-related, and others. Traditionally, 501c3 or charitable status is afforded regardless of the approach of the organization. If they show a charitable purpose, whether it's religious or oriented toward women or pets or to research an illness or all the things that our charitable organizations do, then they can maintain that. But there's some question now that the administration may attempt more of a litmus test to suit their particular interests. And I think that could easily, if they continue that, could threaten many organizations, and certainly many organizations oriented towards some women's issues. So we're going to keep an eye on that one.
Well, and to note, the tax status is an IRS tax status. And so I'm going to link in this week's show notes kind of a myth versus facts on the 501c3 piece. But, I think it is an issue of, again, something to be aware of. I was complimenting myself on the ums, and I just gave a big one. But something to be aware of, organizations that are doing a lot of social service work, service providing, healthcare providing, all of those things could be impacted. So something for us to keep an eye on for sure.
And I want to say that many people don't realize we could all have differences of opinion with these organizations. For example, they support all religious institutions. What if I am not really a subscriber to a particular religion? They still get a 501c3. They still get their charitable exemption. It's not like we have to necessarily agree or participate in the goals of all these organizations. Again, from everything from medical research to social services to religious institutions to schools to universities are tax exempt and have their charitable status. And the hallmark has been that they meet a variety of different needs, and we individually may not love all of them, but that doesn't prevent them from having the status, is what it's always been. So, yes, we'll be keeping an eye on that one. So, what are we doing today?
What are we doing today? Well, childcare, and not just the access of childcare, but the impact of childcare both to families, women in particular, and the economy. So it is going to be, I think, a great conversation about something that for some families have great awareness about, but in others, I think people are going to be surprised by some of the statistics and information around the true impact that childcare has in our economy or on our economy.
Yes, and I think this is one where, just to set the context, childcare is still overwhelmingly the responsibility of women.
Mhm.
So we know this. Again, it's changing in some circles, and we would love parental leave for all, but it is still overwhelmingly the responsibility of women. So when we talk about the impact or the affordability or the lack or the availability, we have to keep that in mind, that it's still primarily a women's issue.
Yeah, it is. And something as I was looking at data and reviewing, and I've said this a couple of times during our episodes, two-thirds, that number, two-thirds keeps popping up as a trend of the number of families that are impacted or the number of, in this case, children in poverty that lack access to the affordable childcare. So I think that there's something to that, there's something to that statistic of, but certainly women are have a much greater impact on childcare and caregiving. So we do have a guest this week that I'm excited to welcome and join. So
Lovely.
I'm gonna have her join us, and she is doing a lot of work in our region on childcare. And
Well,
so
yeah, and while she's coming in, I want to say we talk about the women responsible for childcare, but let's also not forget what is overwhelmingly documented is the importance, especially of early childhood education and upbringing. This isn't a small thing, so we can go into that in greater detail, but the importance of it. So, oh, here's our guest.
I
Wonderful.
know. Hello, Brittany. How are you?
Good. How are you ladies doing?
Good. So Brittany Lamont is the president and CEO of the Lakewood Ranch Business Alliance. And I would love for you to just do a quick intro, and then we're going to dive into all the great work that you're doing on childcare and access to childcare in our region.
Yes, yeah. So, Brittany Lamont, President and CEO of the Lakewood Ranch Business Alliance. Also, I am leading the task force for the Early Learning Coalition. And our task force is geared towards trying to create capacity and the affordability of childcare in Sarasota. So, passion project for me as I have three kids, 9 and under. So, very much understand the struggle of not only finding a high quality childcare provider, but the cost even for two working parents, the cost for putting multiple children through childcare. My second is in VPK, so I'm almost there. I'm a little more than halfway through to the school system. So, but appreciate being here with you ladies today.
Well, excellent. So I'm just going to kind of jump in and we'll go from there. Um, the reality is that 68%, almost 68% of children under the age of 6 have both parents working. So that's
Hmm.
a big percentage of working parents, but the majority of those parents have reported having to make changes in work schedules or changes in how they're working in order to be able to cover childcare. Because you said the cost, when we look at the cost of childcare, it is the number 2 expense in a household for
Hmm.
parents to send their kids to a quality childcare. And so that is a big issue that's impacting not just the parents, but I would imagine the employers.
Yes, and that is something that we looked at. So the task force did a survey to local employers in the Sarasota County region. And you're right, Ashley. From an employer standpoint, they said that two-thirds of their employees reported struggling to find childcare.
Uh-oh.
And so, in the way in which it's hit the kind of employer radars, this is leading to increased absenteeism or loss of productivity for the employer. It's become an issue in recruiting and retaining employees. I think we saw, right after the pandemic or during the pandemic, that a lot of families made choices, and unfortunately, it was a lot of women who had to make choices of leaving the workforce during that time. But employers want women back. I mean, they're such an asset to the workforce, and I know
I wonder how we can get Brittany a little more stable here. Ashley, you good? Can
um, you know, while while I would admit sometimes as a mom we take on the burden of schedules and are the first ones to kind of throw our hands up and say I'll make the sacrifice. But it really is affecting working families, and then that's directly affecting our economy and our employers as well.
And so Brittany, you froze for a brief second, so we're going to kind of watch that and see how it goes. But I think that I just want to make sure on your thought that even for it's not just a single mom issue, that oftentimes it's just, and we've talked about this so many times in this podcast of what the roles of the family are, and that
Hmm.
childcare, any type of care, can fall to the female. It's just the natural, and something that I think we need to make sure we continue to talk about and raise topics of normalizing that it's not just a women's issue. It shouldn't be.
No, I agree. Yep, definitely a family's issue or a family issue.
And when we talk about the economic impact, the Florida Chamber actually put a report out on untapped potential. I think it was over a year ago that the report came out. And when we want to talk about dollars and cents, the economic impact to the state of Florida for inconsistent or lack of quality, affordable childcare, it was a big number, like
Hmm.
5.3 billion with a B. So when it becomes a business issue, do we think that is, I think it's great when the business community gets involved in recognizing not only the impact on them, but their role in addressing a barrier to their employees. So what's happening locally with that?
Sure. And I want to touch on that from a business perspective. I say all the time, I think the greatest challenges that a community faces can be solved with really the business community, the nonprofit community, and government kind of all working hand in hand in this. And so I think that's what we're starting to see in the state of Florida, and locally, you've got a lot of nonprofits who are working with some of our underserved population to make sure that the affordability and accessibility is there for those families. But we've been working with Representative Fiona McFarland on her tax credit for employers. And what that looks like is if an employer wants to create on-site daycare, so if you think of your PGTs or your Sarasota Memorial Healthcare Systems, 50% of their startup costs they can put up against that tax credit. Now, I do want to be clear, you have to be paying some kind of state tax, insurance, alcohol and beverage, corporations. So some of our nonprofits or some of our LLCs, they can't take advantage of that. The other component of it is the $300 per child. So, one of the employers that we worked with locally is Gold Coast Eagle Distributing. We can get a beer distributor to care about childcare. We can get any employer to care about childcare. And Andrea, who's taking over the company, she's a mom herself. Her kids are much older now, but and what she's doing is it's a $300 per month per child. And so she had identified it was about 14 in her company. And so she's working directly with the daycares, the childcare facilities, to provide those $300 a month stipends, which is huge. And that's now a benefit of working at Gold Coast Eagle if you have children in 0 to 5. And then as well as if you are a grandparent or a guardian taking care of a child, you can also utilize that tax credit as well.
So it's, wait a minute, let me just be clear. It's a $300 tax credit per month. Is that it for one child?
For each child. So if my 3 kids were in daycare, you can use it against each child.
So you could cumulate. So it could be $900 for your 3 children.
You can cumulative it. If an
Okay.
employer is wanting to give that um kind of investment to their folks.
And is there a max? Is it $3,600 per individual per year? Is that in my head or did I make that up?
Per child will be per
Per child.
child per year, I
Oh,
think.
okay. Nice.
Yeah. Unless I need to be second guessed on that one, which I can definitely reach out to her team. But I know we've been the one of the issues that we have had is how do we get employers to start taking advantage of this tax credit? A lot of it, when they released it in October, and the applications came in, a lot of employers just didn't realize that they weren't paying a state tax. So if you look at Sarasota and Manatee County, how many amazing nonprofits we have, Ashley couldn't take advantage of that for her team because she's not
Mhm.
a corporation. So, and as a small business dominant community, we're hoping that some other larger employers around the state also take advantage of it. And there's been a creation of these kind of task forces around the state. There's about 7 or 8 of us. I'm actually headed to Orlando. I think it's next week or the week after to talk at our state conference, our chamber state conference, with a bunch of other chambers to talk about this. So it's very much hitting the employer radar. But listen, we were given 5 million per year for the next 3 years, and we have to make sure that we're utilizing it. So right now, Early Learning Coalition of Sarasota County has been huge in just creating the awareness.
Mm.
To me, it is a tool in the toolbox. This tax credit is not the end all be all of solving the child care crisis, but it's one step and one tool that we can utilize. I think it works a little bit more towards the affordability part of it. It does not help with accessibility unless the employer is creating its own childcare. But I know there's a lot of other projects going on for accessibility and bringing more daycares online.
So if you're working to raise awareness, as I understand, so that businesses, is that the main impediment? They just don't know about it, or are there either procedural things? Why might a business look at this and say, ah, it's not worth it to us? I mean, are there other downsides or costs or regulatory burdens? Because you think this would be an easy ask for them, an easy success for them.
It's kind of two things. I always say business is not trying to make their operations harder. Put it that way. Like so, for an employer to commit to this, the one barrier I'm seeing, let's use Gold Coast Eagle as a great example. Manatee County. So now she has to write
Hold on,
checks
Brittany.
every month
Go, sorry,
to
you froze for a second. You said, let's take Gold Coast Eagle as an example.
let's take Gold Coast Eagle as an example. She right now has to provide separate payments to these different daycares. So
Mm.
this is adding, 5, 10 vendors to her accounts payable. So there's a little bit of procedural things. I think there can be a really good partnership where maybe a business partners with the childcare provider right by their office and it's kind of a one-stop shop relationship. And then a recruitment tool and a retainment tool for sure. But figuring out how to best utilize it and deploy it to their team is kind of, what do they say? You're fixing the engine while it's going down the track is kind of how we're working on this tax credit right now. That is why to me Gold Coast was such a good case study.
Mhm.
And if you know Andrea Saputo, you know she is crossing every T and dotting every I. So she was able to give real feedback to the Department of Revenue of like, well, your application was complicated here, and this is a great idea, but here, and that was I kid with Fiona McFarland all the time. She's like, I'm the policy maker. The implementation I'm bringing to you guys. So we're test driving it to see. She wanted to make some modifications this session. I'm not sure if she has. If not, she'll go back next session to again try to make this. It has to be as easy for employers as it can be.
Well, and one of the things, and that's a thread through this, when you talked about you have a real life experience with three kids under the age of 9. Um, the president of the Gold Coast Eagle
Mhm.
is a mom. Fiona McFarland has 4 kids, or a representative. And that's something that Scott and I have talked about in previous episodes, the importance of the lived experience in more women, working women being involved in leadership roles, whether it's in elected officials or at the table at companies. If you aren't aware of the realities of
Mhm.
issues like this, you aren't motivated to make changes. So I think it's just a great example of how working women can change policy or change how the benefit structure to support more working moms to fulfill their career goals or support their family. And Scott
I
has
think
something I can tell.
I do. She's been with me before. I
Mm,
completely agree, but I think there's also another step is that many women also have to make the leap that this is not necessarily their personal burden to share alone. It's a psychological thing. For generations, women have just assumed this is kind of the way it works. And, if I don't have
Mhm.
an easy solution, that's up to me to figure it out, on my own because it's my responsibility. I mean, that has traditionally been the way it's been viewed. And I would argue there's still many women who have a little bit of that in their head still today. And so aren't as willing, perhaps, or able to speak up and say, wait a minute, we need companies involved or we need more from the
Mhm.
government because it shouldn't just be on us as mothers in that case. So I think there's a
Right.
psychological component too.
Yeah, and when last time I was in Tallahassee and I was talking to Fiona, I said to her, I said, in a way, this isn't even for us. By the time I gain real traction on this initiative, my little guy's going to head into the Manatee County school system, and probably similar to her, but just because I had a burden doesn't mean I shouldn't make it better for the mom after me. I mean, really, isn't that the whole culture of uh the employment in America? I mean, in the 20s, the working conditions weren't what they are today. Like every generation has, I would hope would help kind of move the needle in the best working conditions that we possibly can. And I think the American family, the workplace in general has evolved. And so yeah, I hope truly there is a time in which a woman can feel like she can do both and that she can feel supported by her employer, that she can feel supported, in all the different aspects. I try to very much lead by that with a very family friendly workplace. I tell my team all the time, don't make this job another reason you have mom guilt. That's not what we're doing here. We're going to support you in the hours you're not in the office and the hours you are in the office. So I think there has been I hope, I really hope there has been a new generation of leadership, whether it is a woman or a man, who has put value back into work life, family life, being, a rock star at work and at home. Maybe that's
I
naive of me,
certainly
I don't
hope
know,
so.
but that's what I'm out here striving for.
Right.
It's not just the guilt issue that we want to relieve. As we saw last episode, the impact of women having to either reduce their work hours or step out or go to part-time work for a while, which is the story of most women when they have young children. They have to pull back from a job in whatever that job might be. And there are lifelong consequences to that in their career, in their wealth, in their accumulation that go all the way up to retirement. So it's
Absolutely.
not just, well, maybe we suck it up for a few years. There are lifelong impacts from that,
Hmm.
and that hurts everyone.
Yeah, they got to catch up salary, perspective
Totally.
wise,
Mhm.
Yep.
career projections, all of that.
And I think that the childcare issue is such an easy, tangible example of a barrier, a true barrier that can impede, that we have the ability to make some differences on. And conversations that I mean, I have as we all do, a wide variety of thoughts and opinions with friends, family on policy, government's role in our world. And I think ultimately we all want people to have that opportunity to build economic self-sufficiency and success and take care of ourselves. And how we get there and having these conversations about how to unwind some of the things that do serve as a barrier. It's complex and it takes us working together and having meaningful conversations on, okay, this works, this doesn't work, and we don't have to be at odds. And I've loved seeing the true nonpartisan approach to this, that it's not a left or right issue. It is truly a family issue, an employer issue, and an economic issue. And I think if we can frame more things in that context, that we might get more stuff done. Is that me being Pollyanna again, Scott? Scott's
Oh
like,
no.
No,
so
I
adorable.
don't
Actually.
I don't think I have ever heard the conversation so loud at all levels of government for this issue right now. I mean, on both sides, doesn't matter what your political party is. I mean, from county commissioners to the state legislature to it's been a federal conversation. I don't think that this is at all a part. Now, how you get to the solution might be a partisan issue, right? But I think the issue at hand, everybody knows like something
Has to be done is what I'm thinking.
Something has to
yes,
give.
Has to be done. All right, Scott, I
something
feel
has
like
to be
you
done.
had something.
Well, I just wanted to say, or maybe ask, if we know where Florida fits in the US and where the US fits in other countries. I certainly know from other research that we are possibly the only or one of the maybe one of two democratic capitalist economies that do not provide any kind of childcare or family leave benefits at a national level. I mean, we're almost unheard of. So the fact that we're still working on it, but do we know where Florida fits in compared to other states? Are we learning from them, or do either of you have that information?
Work done in Michigan, I know for sure. We saw some test studies there. And there was another state, I want to say it's one of the states out west, that was looking at some kind of, I don't want to say universal childcare as much as I want to say expansion of current services, like expansion of VPK, which I know is something Ashley knows how much work Deborah and all of them have been working on that. So maybe shortening the time frame before the state's able to take over from an educational standpoint, that type of thing.
Scott, I think that there's a lot of work to do. I think that the Florida Chamber and the Florida business community, I do think are leading the way on having these conversations. There's the, in bringing in the business community, is an important aspect, I think, to moving the needle and knowing that we need the public, private, government, nonprofit collaboration. But there's
Mhm.
still a lot of work to be done. And before we move on to kind of our recap, because our time again, we always think we're going to be short and we're more lengthy, is it's not just about helping moms and families stay in the workforce. It's also about the education of the child and the development of the child and having that quality childcare, having them ready as they go into the public school system. And it makes a huge difference of the brain development, the number of words they hear, their reading level. And so it's really just a multifaceted reasons on why it's so important. And I just don't want that to get lost in the conversation of, yes, there are these issues for the parent, but it's also the development of the child.
Thank you. I was
Yeah.
going to say that I'm glad, and we haven't really talked about the access or the quality issue, which of course,
Mhm.
they're all tied together. This is great that we've got some possibility that, money will flow into it essentially, but the quality is a huge thing. And can I just raise one thing though? I love that report, the Florida report, and forgive me for what the title of it was called, Ashley, that
Untapped potential.
thank you. And I love that. But can I raise the point that they never actually talk about women are responsible for childcare? It's always families. And while I love that families, dads, grandparents, step parents are included, it felt to me a little bit like, are we not trying to acknowledge that it is women who are doing this? I mean, I found that very interesting. So I'm delighted that there was attention on it. But I couldn't help but note that women's contribution felt like it was lost, and women's burden felt a little bit like it was lost in that report.
Mhm.
And I think it could be. So if we go for the positive intent of trying to change the narrative that it's not just a women's issue, but the reality is two-thirds, again, that two-thirds number, the two-thirds of
Mhm.
employers, their employees have this issue. There's a theme there. I think there should be a whole thing, Scott,
There's a
of
thing.
the majority of this does fall to women. And so I think that should always be part of the conversation. While it is a family issue, the burden is being shouldered more by
Yeah, and I wanted to mention Ashley too. You talked about qual you guys both referred to quality. We can't continue to focus on third grade reading levels and not identify the impact that early childhood education has on it. We are not going to fix them from K to 3. We need to start looking earlier. It is cradle the whole way up. And so to your point on quality, I just wanted to make sure to note that it is so impactful for these children to have a high quality education going into kindergarten so that they can be ready.
Is this a good time to mention that I believe Head Start programs are being defunded? And Head Start, of course, has for many, many, many years been the best resource for many women in poverty to have quality care for them children. And we're about to lose, it looks like, another place where quality childcare is available for women. So there's going to be a gap there.
Huge gap.
And Scott, to that point, I think when we look at what we would want our listeners and our community to pay attention to, the untapped potential report, we're also linking a report that is more of a US view that talks not only about Head Start, it talks about the increase in poverty, childcare deserts. So there's a lot of different layers to this issue, and we need to be paying attention and reaching out to our elected officials to say, if we see cuts, if we see things happening, oftentimes they're not looking at the broader picture and impact that it has. So continuing to use our voices to to bring the topics that are really important to our communities forward, because it is meaningful. One of the issues that will not make it to this session in the state of Florida, but I think will next year, is the request to expand VPK. Right now it's 3 hours a day. That would be really difficult to work if that was your only form of childcare. So expanding it, right, Brittany? That's a great look, Brittany, of expanding it to give more longer days and more access for working families to have that quality, safe, affordable option. So we have that to have on our horizon, have awareness about what's going on with the tax credit. And Brittany, we're going to link some information on that as well.
Great.
What else would you ask for people? Oh, and then Scott, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, and I think really everybody should keep in mind that this is one that it's like everybody wins. This is a win-win-win. So this should not be one that's divisive. You know, we have so many issues where there are quote unquote winners and losers. I don't like to look at it that way, but this is just one where you feel like, what's the downside if we just put the pieces together? I mean, I'm a little bit Pollyanna about that one too, but this really is one where there's so many winners. So I hope people keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just continue to create awareness. And you make a good point, Ashley. Monitoring the issues, talking to your local officials at any level of government, and making sure they understand how important this is.
Well, Brittany, thank you for joining us, and thank you for the work that you're doing and using your voice to elevate this topic beyond, beyond just the individual and making it the community issue. So we appreciate that.
Thank you
And
so
I
much.
appreciate you, ladies. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. And Scott, as always, it is a pleasure to be with you.
As always, I'll see you soon.
We will see you next time. Thank
Thank you.
you.